All right, so today we are going to be talking about 50-year mortgages. So I know, let me just make sure this is recording. Okay, cool. All right, so I know there's been a lot of talk about 50-year mortgages, pros, cons, and from a lot of financial gurus. You probably heard all the cons. So if you're already financially stable, you're on your way to financial freedom, this is not for you. I want to make that very clear. If you are already financially stable, you are on your way to financial freedom, this video, a 50-year mortgage, I'm just going to cut right to it, is not for you. This video are for those who are struggling, who have been renters for a very long time, in a season of life where chances are a lot of them may perhaps have children, or maybe they're just very young in life, and let's say you're in your 20s and you're trying to figure out, okay, um, is a 50-year mortgage a good option? Okay, so I just want to make sure that I'm very clear about who this video is for, because if you're already financially free, I'm going to say it again, if you're already financially free, or you're on your way to financial freedom, you're part of the FIRE movement, which is financial independent, retire early, or you're already like well on your way to, you already have your investment portfolio, all of that set up, and you're well on your way to financial freedom, this video isn't for you. Again, this video is for those who have been renters for a very long time, and your dream is of home ownership. Okay, there's plenty of videos out there about like the pros and cons of home ownership. You have already decided for yourself that your pathway is that you decide you want to become a homeowner. Okay, so I just want to be super clear about who that's for. Now, with that being said, okay, so let's talk about, I actually want to start off by talking about the why someone like yourself, if you're watching this video, is even entertaining the idea of a 50-year mortgage. So a 50-year mortgage, much like in some ways, right, they still haven't released the details, it's just simply going to stretch out your loan, okay, which means on the positive side, your how much you're paying each month, your mortgage payment now becomes like actually doable, because for the most part, for most people who are thinking about getting a mortgage as a home that they're living in, okay, as a home that you're living in, you have to be very clear that your home that you're living in, like I see my investment properties, rental properties, as an investment. I do not see the home I'm living in as an investment. I see it as a liability because I'm living there. Because I'm living there myself, and we have kids, so we're not renting out the rooms or anything of that nature. It is therefore a liability because it's not generating me income, right? So let's just be clear on that. So when you decide to get a mortgage, just keep in mind that it is a liability. It's a home that you're living in, unless you plan on getting like a duplex situation or something of that nature, where, I do have a client who did do that, where she lives in one space and then she rented out like the other 3 units. Totally fine, because now the only real, I want to say real cost would be, of course, her ensuring that she still like has food and like living expenses, but she doesn't have to pay for her mortgage because it's being paid for, right? But when you're entering into a 50-year mortgage, I'm going to assume that for a lot of you, it is going to be a single family home. Just keep in mind that it is a liability. It is stretched out. The payments are going to be lower. However, you're paying an astronomical amount of interest. Because if you really think about 50-year mortgage, most people, their mortgage is like 30 years, right? And that in itself, and there's like 15-year mortgages. So the longer your mortgage, the higher, not the higher your interest rate, but the higher you're paying in terms of interest, okay? So just keep in mind. Something else you want to keep in mind. So first, I don't know what the interest rates are going to be on these 50-year mortgages. Details, again, haven't been, and it really just also depends on where interest rates goes, right? As of the recording, it is November 2025, right? The Federal Reserve has already started decreasing interest rates little by little. Banks haven't followed yet for the most part, except for you're noticing probably your high yield savings accounts are quickly following that, right? But so far, as far as like the loans itself, you're not seeing that play out as far as a lot of banks now are offering like lower rate loans, okay? So, but that doesn't mean it's not going to change. It's just more so letting you know that usually when the Federal Reserve drops rates as far as loans go, it does take a while for them to like follow suit and drop interest rates as well. So depending on where that interest rate will, again, regardless, you're still going to pay almost double because of the fact that there's 15-year mortgages, there's 30-year mortgages, and now it's like stretched out, which means that you're going to pay double that as far as interest goes, right? I'm also going to make a couple of assumptions here. This is not true for everyone. This is not true for a lot of people. And please know that I am very sympathetic towards this because we have been in situations where we had a lot of medical debt as well because of my special needs son. So my heart really goes out to you. For those of you who do struggle with like having bad credit, it's like that is going to be more important than ever because now your interest rate is, a big part of that is determined by your credit score, how long you had like loans open, how punctual you are towards paying those loans, and of course how much of that you actually use, like any available credit, what percentage of that you use, how diligent you are on your payments. All of that comes into play, and it's going to be very important when you go into, if you decide to, utilize the 50-year mortgage, because now whatever your interest rate is, it's going to be, this loan is going to be, for most of you, I would assume if you're watching this video, you're probably in your 30s, 40s, maybe some of you are like in your 50s, maybe a few, like I have a small percentage of you who are in your 20s, and that's okay because for a 20-year-old, it's going to play out a little bit differently in that because of how long humans do live now, you actually possibly could pay off your loan if you're like 18 now and watching this video, you're 20 now and watching this video, you probably could potentially pay off your loan by the time you actually stop working, because it seems like people are waiting longer and longer to retire just because of cost of living, etc., and humans as general, we're just living longer. However, for majority of people, if you're thinking in terms of your family, right? So you're paying higher interest, but you do at least can enter the market. Okay? You can at least enter the market, and you're probably thinking about your children. I do want to make this very clear. Your mortgage, where you're living in, because it's not paid off, okay, because of how long it is stretched, unless it is paid off through your estate, you are more likely than someone who has a 15-year mortgage or who has a 30-year mortgage to basically leave this earth with your home being a liability, which means then you don't have that same opportunity, if you so choose to pass on generational wealth, which is, you could pass on your home through a trust, right? I'm not going to get fully into that, but I just want to make it clear. So if you have that, there's a part of you that thinks, oh, I'm going to hold on to this home and I'm going to pass it on to my kids, so it doesn't matter. Just keep in mind that because of the longevity of this loan, and chances are, depending on how old you are, you probably will like meet Jesus and your kids, it's not going to be an asset you could actually be able to pass on to your children, because there's still probably a significant amount of money that's going to be still owed on this loan. So that's just something to keep in mind. So as long as you're okay with that, as long as you are okay with the understanding that I have this home now and it's going to help me enter the market. You've been a long time renter, you're sick and tired of being a renter, you want your kids in a very good school district, and you have been living in an apartment, I'm going to just assume a lot of you are in the suburbs, yeah. Maybe some of you are in the city, but most people that I personally, well, I live in the suburbs. But most people that I do know who eventually, when you have kids, have the tendency to go further out into the city, away from the city, and go to uh, where good school districts are, right? So like right now, we live in a very good school district. It has some of the top schools in the nation. Because of that, our property taxes are very high. That's something else I want you to consider. When you have a mortgage, your property taxes are going to increase. Yes, rent, you could say rent. Well, yeah, I pay rent now, and a part of that goes into property tax. Yes, but not to the extent it does when you have a mortgage, okay? I want you to be very clear. I want to be very clear on this, is that when you're renting, you're not accustomed to maybe having a bill that comes twice a year or having it like into your mortgage. But property tax, especially for those of you who are parents and you're thinking about your children, is that you want them in good school districts, and with good school districts, there's always been a correlation for the more you pay in property taxes, for the most part, you're like in better school districts. And so I would just want you to keep that in mind, that if that's what you're planning on doing, you're either you have young children and you're thinking about them entering school, or you're just tired of being a renter and you want to have your own home. It's just keeping in mind that there is going to be property tax involved on top of like your mortgage, which typically it is included, like they'll add that on just so you're not like freaking out like once a year when we have a big tax bill. So I just wanted to be very clear on that, because there's a lot of things that comes with like home ownership that you just want to be aware of, okay? So like we have renters, and for us, because as a landlord, we take care of everything. They don't have to worry about that. They didn't have to worry when the water heater went out, right? Because that's something we took care of. We had to take care of the roof, but that was something that we already knew. Like when you go into a business and you go into like becoming a landlord, you would go into like investment property, any of that, that there's going to be expenses. But I just want to be clear that for the person who is going to become a first-time home buyer, the one who's thinking like you want to make that transition, is there are a lot of expenses I want you to keep in mind when you become a homeowner. For us personally, it was worth it. We want our kids to be like, in very good schools. We want them to feel safe in neighborhoods that were safe, where they, like my kids, literally, like they can bike, they can walk with their friends, they can meet them like right around the corner, and I don't have to worry. That was not something I had an opportunity to experience when I was a kid, right? Because I grew up in the projects in South, like where I was, and so I didn't have that same experience. And so for me, it was very important that my kids never have to like worry as much to the extent as possible. And so there's certain things, there's always going to be trade-offs that you do, but I just want you to just keep that in mind as you're thinking, okay, I want to do, you're contemplating a 50-year mortgage, what that looks like. The main thing is that you are going to be paying like an astronomical amount of interest. Chances are you're not going to be able to then pass that on even through a trust, simply because there's going to be money on it by the time you meet Jesus, most likely, right? And I also want you to keep in mind that for the average person, they move after 5 to 7 years. Okay, I want you to actually look back at your life and just take a look at like the last 10 years. Have you moved, or did you just stay in like one area, right? If you stayed in one area, chances are, okay, you really are committed to being in that area for at least the next 10 years or so. Or you could be in a situation where, you have young children now, and so maybe there's daycare expenses, maybe there's just associated expenses with them not being in school yet, but you plan on once they enter and they're of school age, perhaps you intend on working, right? Whatever the case may be. But if you foresee uh, that your career trajectory is actually going to go upwards, um, then then you can really look into like refinancing to like a shorter term, to a 15-year or 30-year loan, something along those nature. Because if you decide, I want to be very clear on this, if you decide to move in the next 5 to 7 years and you get a 50-year mortgage, it's going to be very difficult, because most of the mortgage, the money that you're paying towards your mortgage, is going to be towards your interest, which means it's very going to be difficult for you to build equity. So it's going to be much tougher than for you to actually decide, oh, I want to sell my house in the next 5 to 7 years. So we're thinking like, if you're contemplating a 50-year mortgage, I want to be very clear, this is a long term. Like, you're planning on basically being there for the rest of your life. Like, I don't know how else to say it, and but that's really what it is, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, my husband and I love what we are, love the area that we live in, and so for us, it's like, we have a 30-year mortgage, and we were able to capture it at a very low interest rate, and so, and we love where we live. Could that change? Maybe. And that's the reason I say it's very important then for you to be honest about where you see yourself in the next, I mean, it's a 50-year mortgage. So you're not even thinking in the next 5 to 7 years where, what the average person actually tends to move is the next 5 to 7 years. You're thinking in terms of maybe the next 20 years, the next 20, 30 years. I mean, it's, for me personally, it's very hard to fathom, like, myself 20 years from now. Like, do I even know if that's where I want to live? But I also at the same time sympathize and empathize with those of you who are struggling, who have been long-term renters, and how difficult it is, especially if you have children and you want to have them in nice school districts. And I completely understand that, because our school district right now, I take a look at the apartments and townhomes that's around my area, and it's like my brain is just like, holy cow, like, how much people are paying in terms of rent. Yes, they don't have to pay for like additional expenses and things of that nature, but it's like I'm shocked at how much people pay. But at the same time, with parents, one of the things we do prioritize is safety, especially when you have kids and school age kids. You're thinking like the best school districts you could put them in, the safe neighborhoods you could put them in, where you feel safe and you feel comfortable with them growing up. Like, those are typically our priority as a parent. And so I completely understand why you would be entertaining a 50-year mortgage. And I hope that was helpful for you. I hope that just gives you something to like think about and contemplate for yourself. Like, does this make sense for me to, enter a 50-year mortgage? And I wanted to talk about this because one of my students inside of my Wealth Builder Circle actually asked this question. And, she's in her 50s. And for me, I just had to be very clear with her that this is a very, I mean, it's 50 years. So that's just the reality of how long the mortgage is. And most people, keep in mind, most people, even in 30-year mortgage, they move in 5 to 7 years. It's very rare that people actually stay in that same area. So that's something I really want you to think about, because equity is going to be very slow to build, because most of your interest, even in like a 30-year mortgage, it's going to be, in like the majority of your payments is going to go towards interest, especially in the beginning, because the equity itself is going to be a slow build. So that's something I really want you to keep in mind if you are entertaining the 50-year mortgage. But if you are, I want you to know that I just want you to be very clear, have a clear mind, and not just be pulled in by like possible real estate friends and things of that nature, because at the end of the day, they run a business, and for them it's like if they can get you into a house, they're going to do that. And they're just thinking in terms of like how much you can afford. But I just wanted to give you a realistic lens on which to how to approach a 50-year mortgage. Ultimately it's up to you if you decide to do so. um, yeah. Yeah, it just really depends, because everyone's situation is unique. It's different circumstances. I'm a special needs mom, so I personally couldn't fathom living in an apartment right now with like having, like my teenage son with special needs. And then you could be in a similar situation, or you could be in a different situation that just requires then, or really it is such a strain on you to be in an apartment, or it's just really hard for your lifestyle, whatever it is that you prioritize. All right. I hope this was helpful for you, and I will catch you next time, friends.